So it's important to not just take these examples and be like, oh, well then I'm going to be a solo agent because they make more. That's not always the case. You have to really make sure that you understand what the fees are for the particular team or brokerage that you're interviewing with, and whether or not those resources justify the fees that you will be paying. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me once again for some more real estate content.
He doesn't know anything about property ownership. He's kind of an idiot.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about the difference between a real estate team and working as a solo agent in a brokerage. Now, I'm not going to tell you that one is better than the other because truly it depends on your needs and your personality type. I did start off as a solo agent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right decision for you. It just depends. And so in this video, I want to outline the basic differences between the two so that you can make the most informed decision for you. Alright, so we're going to start off by talking about what it's like to work in a real estate team. Now, I have not worked in a real estate team myself because I've just started out and I've chosen to start as a solo agent, but I did interview with a real estate team and I watched a bunch of awesome videos while I was in the process of choosing a brokerage that really outlined what it meant to be working in a team, and I'll definitely link a couple of those videos in the description below because they were really helpful for me when I was making my decision. When working in a team, you will be given certain resources that a solo agent may not have. However, for these resources, you do have to give up a larger portion of your commission. Now, it is totally up to you to determine whether or not those resources are worth it if you're okay with giving up a larger portion of your commission for those resources. I can't tell you whether or not it's worth it because not every team is created equal. So you definitely have to talk to various different teams in order to see for yourself if you would like to be in that environment or not, if it would be beneficial for you. In my experience, when I interviewed with teams, some of the resources that they offered were lead generation, marketing, they'll purchase their signs for you, things like that. So when you interview with a team, make sure to ask them what specific resources are they offering you, and at that point you can make the decision of whether or not you're okay with giving up a larger portion of your commission in order to get those resources in return. Alright, now let's talk commission splits and fees. Last time we talked a lot about that. When you're working in a brokerage as a real estate agent, you do pay a brokerage split. Oftentimes that is 70-30. Not always, it does differ, but for our purposes today, we're going to be using 70-30 as our example. So you're paying that brokerage split. When you're in a team, you also have to pay what's called a team split. That is the percentage of your commission that you're paying in order to receive the resources that a team is offering you. For our example today, our brokerage split is going to be 70-30. Our team split is going to be 30%. And our cap is going to be $10,000. Before I go into depth, I did want to mention that in a team, the brokerage split does go away once you cap. So once you've made a certain amount of money within the year, that brokerage split is gone. You don't have to pay that anymore. But the team split never goes away. You always owe that percentage. And when you're interviewing with a team, you want to clarify what that percentage is for their team. 30% is just what I'm using today as our example, but it differs depending on the team that you work for. It also can differ depending on what client you have. If you have a seller, they might charge a different percentage versus if you have a buyer. So you definitely want to make sure that you're getting clarification on what their specific team split percentage is. Let's go over what these commission splits look like in a real life scenario. Let's say you sold a home for $400,000. Typically, a brokerage charges a commission of 6%. That definitely varies and it's negotiable, but 6% is what we're going to use for our example today. Out of that 6%, the agent that has listed the home that is working with the seller typically gets 3.5% and the buyer typically gets 2.5%. In our example, we're going to say that you have not capped yet. You haven't made that $10,000 that you need to make in order to not have to pay the brokerage split. So let's start off with the brokerage split. 30% is our split in this example. So if you sell a home for $400,000 and your commission is 3.5%, that means that your gross commission, or the amount of money that you make before everything, all the splits are deducted from it, is $14,000. We need to deduct the brokerage split from that, so we're going to do $14,000 minus 30%. 30% of $14,000 is $4,200. $14,000 minus $4,200 is $9,800. That's the amount of money that you have left after your brokerage split. Now let's do your team split. In our example, that's 30%. So we're going to do $9,800 minus 30%. 30% of $9,800 is $2,940. $9,800 minus $2,940 is going to be $6,860. There are also typically transaction fees associated with any transaction that you go through. I'm going to be using the fees from one of the teams that I interviewed with as our example today. The fees that they charged was $35 for E&O insurance, which we talked about last time is errors and omissions insurance. It's to cover you just in case you make a mistake on any of the paperwork. So $35 for that, and then they charged $25 for a client gift. That put together is $60 as your transaction fee. So let's deduct $60 from $6,860. We have $6,800 left as our net commission from that $400,000 sale. So you can see how all of those numbers work together in order to give you your net commission. We started with $14,000 gross commission. After deducting all of the splits, the brokerage split, the team split, and the transaction fees, you have a total of $6,800 in net commission. Now let's take a look at what that means in terms of your cap. So our cap for this example was $10,000. That's the amount of money that we need to make in order to not have to worry about that brokerage split anymore. So we've made $6,800 in net commission from this sale, and we are going to deduct that from $10,000, which gives us $3,200 that we need to make in order to reach that $10,000 and not have to pay that brokerage split anymore. I know that was a lot of numbers. It can be very confusing, especially if you're new, but I hope that made sense, and I hope that it helps you see what your commission actually looks like after you deduct all of the fees, especially when you're working in a team, because when you're working in a team, you do have that team split, which you will not have if you're working as a solo agent. Now, I was pretty generous with the commission on this example because I put the team split at 30%. Sometimes the team split is higher, sometimes it's 40 or 50%, sometimes the brokerage split is different. So this was just an example using prices that I found to be pretty common across the board, but it varies depending on the team that you talk to. So take my example with a grain of salt, please, and make sure to do your homework and do your research. Ask the teams that you interview with what their specific rates are so that you can run the numbers yourself as well. Before we move on to talk about what it's like working as a solo agent, I did want to make a few more notes on working in a team. When you're working in a team, you're essentially working a bit more like an employee. Oftentimes teams will want you to come in for a certain amount of hours every day, which isn't the case when you're working as a solo agent. You're working off of their schedule versus working off of yours, which isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's awesome to have that structure and to have somebody that's overseeing you for a certain amount of time every day. It just depends on your personality and what you prefer. Another thing that's pretty common in a team is that agents will have their own designation. So there will be people that work primarily with buyers and people that work primarily with sellers. People will have their own roles, which also isn't usually the case when you're working as a solo agent. Finally, I wanted to say that working in a team can be very beneficial if you're a new agent. Having a set schedule and a support system and resources can be very helpful when you're new to make sure that you're staying on track and staying productive. When you're working in a team, usually there will be a person that's there to help you run your numbers so that they can double check if you're on track to meet your financial goals. You just have to decide if the resources that a particular team is offering you is worth it to give up a larger portion of your commission. One last side note that I wanted to make is that when you're working in a team, oftentimes the marketing that they do is specifically geared towards marketing the team as a whole rather than individual agents. When you're working as a solo agent, it can be really fun and beneficial to spend time branding yourself and marketing you rather than marketing the company that you work for, the team that you work for. So that can be a potential downside depending on what you want to do when you first start off, if you want to brand yourself or not. But that's really up to you to decide. Now let's talk about being a solo agent. Now just because solo is in the title, that doesn't mean that you're by yourself on an island with nobody around to help you and no resources. That's not the case at all. You're still working within a brokerage with other agents, and you can ask for advice from your coach, from your principal broker, from other agents at any time. So you're definitely not by yourself and you have other people to reach out to. One of the big differences is that when you're working as a solo agent, you are accountable to yourself. There is nobody setting your schedule for you, nobody telling you that you have to be in the office from this time to this time. There's nobody really watching you to make sure that you're meeting your goals and that you're doing everything that you need to be doing. You can have a coach that keeps you accountable, definitely, but primarily you are responsible for yourself. This can be really exciting and it might fit your personality perfectly, but you have to make sure that you are able to keep yourself on track and that you are staying productive when you're responsible to yourself, because sometimes it's easy to not be as successful as you want to be when you don't have that accountability from somebody else. Another thing to keep in mind when you're working as a solo agent is that you do have to pay for certain things yourself. So your marketing, your signs, different things like that, you're paying out of pocket for those things. You're also not usually getting a lot of leads coming in from the brokerage when you're working as a solo agent. When you're working in a team, oftentimes they will give you leads. Sometimes they are internet leads or Zillow leads, but when you're working as a solo agent, you're not getting lead generation like that. Finally, as I mentioned previously, when you're working as a solo agent, you can build your own brand. So you do have to pay for marketing and things like that yourself, but the exciting part is that you get to market yourself as a solo agent. You don't have to market the team as a whole, you get to market you. And that can be a really beneficial part of being a solo agent. Now, as far as commission splits go, when you're a solo agent, you do not have to pay that team split that we talked about previously. There are a lot of other costs that often come into play, like I was talking about before, you know, the signs, the marketing, things like that that you have to pay for that you wouldn't have to pay for in a team, but you don't have to worry about that team split coming off of every transaction that you close. Let's come back to that example of the $400,000 house that I was talking about previously. Let's say that now instead of working in a team, you're a solo agent working in a brokerage. You sell a home for $400,000. You're making 3.5% commission on the sale of that home. In this example, let's also say that you haven't capped yet, so you still owe that brokerage split. We'll use the same brokerage split in this example, 30%. So like we talked about previously, $14,000 is your gross commission minus 30%. 30% of $14,000 is $4,200, so you're making $9,800 after that brokerage split. Now, there's also transaction fees when you're working as a solo agent. For this example, I'm going to use the transaction fees that are in my company. So the transaction fee that we have is $150. So let's subtract $150 from $9,800. Our net commission after that would be $9,650. Again, take this with a grain of salt. This is just an example. This does not mean that solo agents always make more than agents that work in a team. That is not the case at all. But it's just there to illustrate to you that you don't have to pay that team split when you're working as a solo agent. Again, there could be other costs. There could be higher transaction fees. There could be monthly fees. There could be franchise fees, there could be mentorship fees. So it's important to make sure that you know exactly what the fees and costs are for the particular brokerage that you're interviewing with. So it's important to not just take these examples and be like, oh, well then I'm going to be a solo agent because they make more. That's not always the case. You have to really make sure that you understand what the fees are for the particular team or brokerage that you're interviewing with and whether or not those resources justify the fees that you will be paying. Now, I know that was a ton of information and it can be hard to absorb all of that in one sitting, but I encourage you to talk to brokerages, talk to teams, watch other videos besides mine to try and get an idea of whether or not you want to be a solo agent or if you want to start off in a team. One of the videos that I watched talked about having unlimited growth potential when you're working as a solo agent. So when you're working by yourself, you can grow as much as you want to grow. You can work with all different types of clients. You have unlimited growth potential. When you're working in a team, you're usually helping fulfill somebody else's dreams, somebody else's career goals, which is not necessarily a bad thing because they're providing a lot of resources to you in return. But you have to figure out which one you'd rather start off with, and you can always change your mind. If you start off as a solo agent, you can always go to a team later on. If you start off in a team in order to have that security and that support, you can always move to being a solo agent once you feel a little bit more comfortable. If you have any questions about what I talked about today, definitely leave me a comment, and if you're a real estate agent, let me know if you work as a solo agent or if you work in a team and why you made that particular decision. Again, thank you so much for watching today. If you found this content beneficial or helpful in any way, please consider liking and subscribing, and definitely turn on the bell notifications so that you get notified every time I post. I'm hoping to do a day in the life of a real estate agent video sometime soon, as well as covering the Portland market and what it looks like right now, because right now is definitely a very unique time, especially for new agents. Alright, and that's going to be it for me for today, so definitely join me back here next week for another video, and I'll see you then. Bye! Let me show you my cookie I'm about to eat. Look at it. It's like almost as big as my face. Doesn't that look incredible? kitchen sink cookie from Panera. So good. Okay, bye.